my screen? Perfect.
Hey, hi everyone. Once again, thank you for joining today's session on Azure Networking. And today we have our special guest, Tushar Kumar, who will be guiding us through the Azure Networking topics. We'll be going through it for the next 2 hours. Before we get into it, I would like to say two things about today's session, that there is going to be recording that will be available in our YouTube channel for you to refer it again. And secondly, the certificate of participation. After the today's session, you should be able to fill out the form and receive your certificate of participation. So without any more delay, Tushar will be giving an intro to himself and getting into the session. Over to you, Tushar.
Thank you so much, Suraj. So, a very good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever time zone you are in. I see a lot of different time zones people have joined in from. Basically, today we are going to talk about how we can design and implement the Azure networking concepts. Before we get into the technical stuff, like the bits and bobs of all the Azure networking, let's talk about first myself. Let's get acquainted. So my name is Tushar Kumar. I work for a company called Kodak Ireland. I am a cloud solution architect. I am a Microsoft certified trainer, and as well as a most valuable professional for a different cloud platform. Basically, I work in, day out, working with different customers, enterprises, small and medium businesses, defining their cloud journey, defining their architecture, and helping them move to cloud, how they are going to plan their journey to cloud from the conventional data center environments. So that's a bit about me, just to give you a quick view of what we are going to cover in this overall session, right? So from the slides perspective, we are just going to have a couple of slides. It's going to be 10 13 slides, and within the next hour what we are going to cover is each and every parts of Azure, and what I am trying to uh, lay out the foundation from is going to be from the very basics. We'll be starting with the lingos that we use specifically around Azure networking, and then we'll be deep diving into each and every components. And if there is any specific components that might interest you, likes of any specific Azure service that you want to be really elaborated session on, we will be taking it up as a follow-up session up from this. Okay, so I believe everyone happy with this approach. So we'll go with this. Okay, so before we start, we need to understand what is the Azure Network Engineer's role. So if you are looking at, and it's not just applies to a network engineer, if you are a if you are an architect, if you are a support consultant, still it requires the networking piece to be embedded within your role. So a network engineer, basically a day-to-day job is you need to implement Azure networking concepts. You need to maintain hybrid network connections. So there are different terms that we are talking about here, right? Which is Azure networking infrastructure, hybrid networking concepts, routing, load balancing, private access, or maybe I'll say private links, resiliency in the network. So all of these terms that we are talking about, will just touch base upon this, just for those who are just starting or maybe in the middle of the Azure journey, in the middle of their cloud journey. So basically, when we say hybrid networking concepts, what you can see on the screen here, sorry, I'll just go back once. The hybrid networking concepts that you can see here, it's basically what hybrid means is you have your conventional setup. So how it used to be, people used to have their own data centers where they have their own servers, they have their own racks. Even in the office locations, they have a specific server rooms where they have all the servers and racks set up and networking infrastructure set up. They have their switches there, they have their routers set up there. And we used to manage that before the cloud era. And when I say before the cloud era, I am just considering the companies, that I'm just considering the organization who has evolved from that and moved to cloud and who are using the cloud environment. Otherwise, there is still a majority of organizations have their data centers, have their either rented somewhere as a co-location, or they're hosting their own data centers. So basically, they're managing the overall infrastructure by themselves. When we talk about cloud and specific to Azure, whatever networking that you do on cloud, we call it as an Azure networking infrastructure. Fair enough. Name suggests Azure networking infrastructure. That's the cloud. That's the cloud networking infrastructure that we are talking about. When we say hybrid network connections, basically what we are saying is you have your on premises as well. You have what you are doing, and you have extended cloud as well. So in that case, what you have is your some resources are running on cloud, you have some resources running on premises. So let's say you have a website that is running on cloud, you have your accounting software which is running on your on premises. So it's basically you need both of them to talk. So you need to set up an hybrid network connectivity. Okay, so that's all about the hybrid network connectivity. When we say routing is basically we are looking at what way your traffic should be. So let's say, just take an example. Whenever we are driving somewhere, or whenever we are on roads, right? And what happens is, let's say if there is roadworks going on, or if the let's say the authority feels like this road is having a lot of traffic jams, or maybe this road should work properly if everyone goes through this, and maybe make this one way or something like that. That piece comes into picture when we are talking about routing in networking. So if Tushar is trying to reach google.com, okay, how Tushar should go to google.com? So everyone knows how you interact with internet, right? So you send out a request, it goes to a web page, and you get back a response. There is a lot of bits and bobs in the middle of that, but we'll not talk about that. But just in a simple terms, you go on your browser, you type google.com, that sends a request to google.com, and then google.com sends a response back, and that your browser loads that uh, on your screen. So basically, who decides that where it is going to go? If, like, let's say if you do a google.com, or maybe if you try to RDP into some virtual machine, or if you try to ping something, right? Who decides where the request is going to go? So there are a couple of pieces in that. You have DNS names where you are looking at what is going to be the IP address, but the path of that is decided by the routing. So let's say if I am an organization owner, I want to make my environment in such a way that anything. So you might have seen in a lot of environments, in a lot of colleges, in a lot of I'll say offices, when you try to reach something like, let's say, a new website, or maybe a gambling website, you get blocked. You get blocked with some, let's say, Fortinet error that, okay, this website is blocked by your administrator or something like that. So how that is happening, because when you do google.com, when you do livebet.com, what happens is it should be going directly to livebet.com. It should be coming. How your organization get to know that you're going to that? So basically what happens is, whenever you are making a request, there is a routing in place. It says anything that is going out, it should be going through my firewall, and then firewall will be sending it out. So basically putting those policies on and putting those routes on your environment, that's called routing. The next concept is called load balancing. And for those who have worked with cloud, or for those who have not like even worked with virtual machines and or seen virtual machine concepts, right? This is a quite well-known concept in virtual machines as well. When we are looking at load balancing, is basically when you have, let's say, tons of load. You have tons of traffic coming in. How you manage it between your resources, and what is the component is going to be on top of it. Uh, I'm going to talk about this in coming slides as well. So yeah, and the day-to-day engineer roles includes all of these, and basically what you're looking at is managing. You're looking at implementing. You're looking at designing all of these infrastructure. Okay, so and in terms of looking at managing ways, so everything in Azure you can do it in a lot of different ways. So you can either go with PowerShell route, you can either go with Azure CLI route, you can go with Azure Resource Manager templates, or you can go with Azure Bicep templates as well. So basically, the options that you have got in hand is you have an Azure portal. To go there, you can go on virtual networks, you can go on VPN gateways, you can go on ExpressRoute gateways, and you can see what is there. And you can change the configurations, you can put in new values, and whatever you want to do with that particular network, you can do with that. It's all controlled via your resource role-based access control, so you can granularize your all access and everything on top of that. If not, if your organization prefers a different way, if you prefer a different way, you always have all the PowerShell ways. So you have a full PowerShell uh, module available. You can just use the AZ module. You can use all the commands within it around networking, and you can do all the bits and bobs of Azure networking. Azure command line interface, it's the same as PowerShell, you can say. It's just a preferred approach over PowerShell for some people. So it's like you can go into Azure CLI, you can just get the module in, and you can use it for all the changes that you want to do, all the deployments that you want to do. The other thing is, which is very commonly used, and we basically show that we basically promote that within the network operations. So basically, it is a NetOps we are talking about. So everything as code these days we are looking at. So everything that you are doing within Azure networking, if you're doing it through code, it will be easy to maintain. It will be easy to control the overall networking environment. So let's say if you have worked with Azure Portal before, anyone who has access to your Azure Portal can go in, change the virtual networks, delete something, or maybe deploy a new thing, and they will be and they can get away with that. If you have to reverse that, there is no way to reverse that. So let's say if Surag went into my Azure portal, he has access to it. He works for my company only, and he changed something, and that broke down my whole infrastructure, that broke down my websites, that broke down my applications, and it is not able we are not able to connect. You must have heard about Microsoft outage, that someone messed up with DNS and something happened, and everyone all across the globe, like never everyone across the globe had that outage. And even for, I believe, Google, there wasn't a same kind of outage. There was a Facebook outage, same kind of outage. So it's basically, if anyone goes in, and if they do any changes that might break your environment, or you might not even notice. So it's not only from the perspective of breaking the environment, but the thing is, maybe I fire an employee, and he goes in and he adds a backdoor into your Azure environment, and he uses that later on with his malicious intents. So anything that you could, so basically doing the control of all these is very important, and you'll not be able to even notice if you are not doing it a proper NetOps way. So the way it works is you create Azure Resource Manager, Terraform, or Bicep templates. You set it up with DevOps pipelines, and basically Your network engineer is going to maintain those templates in terms of network. You are going to have all the resources defined in that. So anything that gets deployed through DevOps, also you have a full control over it and you can check what changed. So if you have seen the Git way of doing it, so the Git repository, you have everything tracked. So any changes, any commits that you're doing, you have to put a comment onto it. Okay, I changed this because of this. And the biggest benefit that it gives you, so let's say Surag made some changes in the Git repository that broke everything. It's like my environment is now uh, not accessible. What I can do is I can go back to previous commit, which where there was no content from Surag, and I can just go back to previous commit and I can deploy that commit into my production. And what will happen is your environment will become will become available again, because it will go back, change the things that Surag has changed, and you have a full view of what changed, who changed, and how to go back. Okay, so these are a few basically we talked about the roles of network engineers. So you have to, if you are looking at advanced environments where we are looking at overall network operations as a network with DevOps, we are looking at all the concepts that we need to know in terms of networking, which is the hybrid connection, which is the routing, which is the load balancing, and there is a couple of more that comes into picture is like that's called that's called network security, where we are talking about firewalls, where we are talking about web application firewalls, uh, as well as network security phenomena like of DDoS protections and all that we are going to discuss in coming slides. Okay, so yeah, so let's talk about a bit of Azure networking language. Okay, so when I say Azure networking language, it's not we are not I'm not talking about any of the C++, C Sharp, or say or JavaScript. It's just a lingo that any a network engineer speaks mostly, and you will see these kind of words coming in all the time in the when you're designing a proper networking environment. So first thing is virtual networks and subnet. So virtual network and subnet is basically what we are talking about is a network, and what we are doing is we are doing a segregation into it. So it's basically a LAN we are looking at. So it's a local area network for you. Anyone who uses Wi-Fi then know when you switch on your router, it creates a LAN for you. You have your own local network and no one can get into that. That simple. So your home Wi-Fi is your virtual network. Your home Wi-Fi is your LAN, and that is private to you. You have an internet connectivity from there, but no one can get into that because you are not broadcasting anything at the moment. There are two kind of IPs which we can talk about, which is going to be public IP and private IP. And as the name suggests, so if you go on your laptop and if you do ipconfig/all, you will see. So let's see that. Okay, I will just share my full screen. So if you go to command prompt, and if you try just ipconfig/all, you can try it on your own laptops. We'll be presented with a lot of information here. So what we are talking about is we are going to talk about this piece, which is your IPv4 address. So there are two kind of addresses. We have IPv4 and IPv6 as well. But on your IPv4 address, what you can see is mine is 192.168.0.241 and something like this. You will also be presented with something like this, maybe 10.0.0.1, something like that. But this particular piece is called private IP address, which is private to your environment, your specific network. So if you try this from anywhere outside, you will not be able to reach this. But if you do the same, and if you go into your browser and say here, what's my IP? So, okay. So it will give you a different IP address. So this is called your public IP address. So this IP address is broadcasted by my Wi-Fi router. And basically, this is my public IP address. So any of the public resources that we are looking at, right? So if I'm trying to access, let's say Google, so Google doesn't see my this IP. It basically sees this IP. So anything that you're trying to access outside, you'll be presented with this IP. Anything you're doing inside your network you'll be presented with this IP. Okay, so now the problem arises when your private network and you have to access it from somewhere else when it is your private network, and or maybe you have to make connections between two private network. And that's what we are going to talk in coming slides. Okay, so everyone is clear with from the public and private IPs perspective. Now we'll talk about static IP and dynamic IP. So it's really simple. Static IP, what we are talking about is which is not changing, and dynamic IP is called which changes over time. So basically, let's say whenever you restart your computer, or maybe like whenever that IP address gets expired, it's changed. So your home Wi-Fi, if your home router, if you're not specifically paying for it, every time, or it might or might not happen, but every time you restart, it tries to get an IP, and if it can change as well. And these concept work really helps us out, because when we are defining, let's say, networking and network security, it basically helps us out in terms of restricting access to particular resources. So let's say if I want if I have a website and I want only whoever is sitting in my house or whoever isn't sitting in this particular network, right, they only should be able to access that website. So all I need to do is that 35 IP that we have seen, the public IP of mine, need to whitelist on my application, and I can block the rest of it on my application. So what will happen is whenever someone will go to that application, present that, okay, I'm coming from this 35, 135, whatever the IP was, the application will allow them in. If anyone comes from, let's say, my next door neighbor tries to get into that application, it will show that, okay, no, you cannot get into this. This site is not available for you. That's it. So it's like straight away the network will refuse that connection, and and that person will not be able to access that. So that's where we block it, where that's where we refuse the connections based on the IP addresses as well. And the static IP and dynamic IP concept basically comes into picture as well. So if you do not have a static IP, if you put that restriction in place, every time your IP changes, we can look at that piece. We can see how it actually need to redefine that IP address into that. Okay, perfect. So we talked about routing, right? And basically routing, the next piece is routing. And when we are talking about routing, it's basically defined in two ways. We have the route tables. So basically route tables are going to be the collection of all the rules. So let's say if I am saying, if someone tries to go to internet, this is internet. If someone tries to go to internet, he should not be going to internet. He should be going to my firewall first and then going to internet. So we will be putting a route table, and within the route table, there will be a single line which will say this. Okay, that we'll go this route. And if we need to add something else, in terms of, let's say, if you are going to on premises, if you're going to my own network here, another network from here, then in that case, the rules will be not go from firewall. So what we'll do is we'll add another line and say, okay, anyone is trying to go to 10.0.0.0/16, we will be going with that. Okay. Network security groups is the next. So basically, whatever we have in just get rid of all these, my bad drawing. Meanwhile, if you have any questions, just drop in chat and I'll take that towards the end. Perfect. Yeah, so the next one we are talking about is network security groups. Network security groups is nothing but we'll just fly through these. So we have a website, let's say, or we have a virtual machine, we have an app service, we can put network security groups on top of that on the network layer itself, on the subnet side, or on the directly on the machine itself. And what network security group does is it basically gives you a port level security. So let's say everyone knows if you that type in on a browser and you're doing a HTTP connection, you will be using port 80. If you are doing HTTPS connection, you will be using port 443. If you are doing an RDP, you are using 3389. There is a whole list of ports for exchange, for mails, for web browsing, for ping. Everything has its own port that you can find easily on the web. So if you want to block anything, if you don't want anyone using the RDP console and getting into your virtual machine, you can use the network security group and block the port 3389, and you'll be able to, and whatever IPs that you whitelist, they only will be able to do the RDP into it. Okay. Ingress and egress, just the meaning of these words, whoever has a really great English, they can definitely understand that. I was lost in the very beginning. So we are talking about ingress and egress. Ingress means whatever coming in. Egress is whatever is coming out. So whatever traffic is coming in, we talk about ingress. That's ingress. Whatever coming is traffic is going out. Like uh, you are trying to access internet from your machine, that's your egress traffic. Whatever if someone else trying to reach out from outside to your let's say website, your machine as an RDP, that's ingress traffic. So basically you can put rules on it that says if you are going inbound, if you're going outbound, what rules apply. So if you want to block, if you have a virtual machine and you want to block all the internet access on that, you can just put all block rule on the outbound, and no one from that machine will be able to reach any to internet. So if anyone goes into that machine, types google.com, it will fail. Okay, service endpoints is one piece which Microsoft came up with when people started putting rules and groups, right? What happened is you have multiple services within Azure, likes of app service, likes of virtual machine, likes of your function apps, all of those. And there's applications where you need to talk between each other. So it's like the virtual machine needs to call the function app, if the function app needs to call an app service, and it's so on. So it's like logic apps and a lot of things came in. So that's where service endpoint came into picture, where you can whitelist, Microsoft came up with all the specific rules for, let's say, functions, let's say logic apps. So you can just easily go and select, okay, these service endpoints I need to open, which is basically my logic apps, and the application will be able to communicate. Your uh, your security policies on that will not apply. So next one is application security group, which is like if you want to have a specific to some application, you can go with application security group. We can go with specific rules to that. Like let's say my web application should be only open, rest of the things should be locked down. So I'll just apply application security group on a specific web app itself. Okay, so talking about Azure firewalls, basically it's like any other firewall. So what firewall gives you is L5 security. So basically you have all the traffic coming in. So if I am doing something on my laptop, or if I am doing something on a virtual machine in sitting in Azure, it is going, if I'm putting a firewall, everything will go through that. We'll inspect everything. We will see what is there. If there is any malicious traffic going out, if there is any attacks going on, if there is anything malicious happening on network layer, we'll see in the firewall. Okay, that's a short and simple for Azure Firewall. NAT gateways is a concept basically used for the problem that we faced here. So static and dynamic IPs, right? So we talked about this. If you want to keep your IPs static, right? If you want to make sure that all the applications within your environment is showing only one IP address as an outbound to something else, so then you use NAT gateway. So let's say if I have one, two, three, four, five machines, right? And all of them is trying to connect to this. So if I try from here, and if this machine has a public IP, this will show a different public IP. Or if this is into, and at some point of time, if this one tries to access this will show a different public IP. This one shows a different public IP. What we will be doing is we will be putting a NAT gateway on top of this. And what happens is, any point of time, if you go from here, it will go directly onto here. So basically, any application which is looking at this, it will show that that traffic is coming from one single IP, which is NAT gateway's IP. So it basically, what it does is, NAT means network address translation. So whatever network address that you are coming from, it doesn't matter. It translates into the public IP of NAT gateway. Okay. Azure DNS is going to be the next piece which we are talking about. So DNS, whoever is not aware of DNS, the DNS is domain name servers. Anything, the name resolution. So everyone knows that anything that happens within computing world, we do it with IP addresses, right? It's all IP addresses. The way our google.com or facebook.com or twitter.com, everything is surviving is based on DNS. If this DNS piece was not there, I bet like half of the population will not be able to use the internet. Because the thing is, first thing, it makes really complex thing. It make things really complex for everyone, because you don't have, if you don't have DNS, Facebook will be something 104.302, something like that, 255.255, something like that. That's not at all a real address. But if DNS is not there, we all are screwed. Simple. Because if you're changing services, if anything that you want to access, that today you just go onto your browser, type in, and you're good to go. Otherwise, you have to remember each and every services, each and every application's IP address. And what if the IP address is not static and someone is using dynamic IP addresses? In that case, every every 6 days or every month, or whenever the server restarts, there is that process repeats, and you get a memo from Facebook. Okay, now you have to remember this IP address for our website. Okay, so DNS basically maps your name with an IP address. So basically, whenever you do a google.com, it goes and checks that it's register, and you see, okay, google.com is bind with this 105.106 whatever IP address that we have, and the traffic goes to that IP address. Same as Azure provides you a DNS service. So within your network, if or even for public network, you can set up your DNS, and you can set up what names are going to resolve to what. So basically, you can put in your Azure DNS, you can deploy an Azure DNS, and what will happen is, if you set, okay, google.com is not the Google's IP address, google.com is my own IP address. So within your network, within your environment, if anyone tries to access google.com, they will go to your website instead of going to google.com. Okay. Load balancer we already talked about, and we are going to talk about in the next slide as well. WAF is web application firewall. So web application firewall is basically, we are talking about any web applications, the likes of your websites, likes of APIs, likes of chatbots, anything that needs to be protected because websites are always public. So whatever we have here as my mouse is lost here. Okay, yeah, whatever we have within our private network, we are not much worried about that. Okay, the private network is accessed by you only, and if everything is private, you don't have to worry at all from the security perspective, from your network security perspective. If your environment is exposed to internet, so if you have something open to internet and someone is trying to access from internet, likes of your web apps is mostly we are looking at. Sometimes people have web apps, internal web apps as well, but most of the web applications are exposed to internet, and that's where the actual threat starts, wherein you are looking at multiple attacks happening on your website, multiple ways of people trying to get into it, people people like trying to targeting it with their bots, which is like continuously generating traffic, or maybe DDoS attacks or those kind of things that comes into play. So web application firewall basically gives you a protection on top of it. It's actually called a layer 7. So in Azure, we have a couple of options, which is basically a layer 7 protection that you are getting. So there are different layers. If you know about OSI layers, there are different layers in OSI. And the seventh layer we are talking about is the layer 7 protection, what we get from here. Okay. We'll talk about it in coming slides as well. So yeah, coming to Bastion Host. Bastion Host is basically a way of getting into your virtual machines. So earlier what used to be is you have to put a public IP on your virtual machines. You have to put you have to have a connection between your network, or you have to be in Azure network to access a virtual network machine. So RDP into any virtual machines, what happened is it changed, and now we have Bastion Host that we can use, specifically getting into any of the virtual machines, and that happens over a totally different port. It happens over the 443 instead of going through the actual RDP. Okay. Next one is VPN. VPN is basically nothing but virtual private network. And we have been talking about this the whole session is having a private access. So this is your private network, which is sitting in Azure. Okay. You don't have any public endpoint attached to it. Now you are sitting in your office location. How are you going to access this? Or maybe you are sitting in your home. This is your home and this is your office, and you want to access this network. How are you going to access this? You want to access this virtual machine, and this doesn't have a public IP address. This doesn't have any configuration of public configuration. How you're going to access that? So in order to access that, we need a virtual private network, which is basically a network definition what we are talking about. So you'll have a network definition from your office going all the way to your Azure network, and anything that you want to access, you will access through that. And basically, there are different encryption protocols that you can apply, and it is basically likes of IPsec VPN. And what will happen is it will be an encrypted channel between your on-premises, your office location, your laptop to the Azure network. Okay. So yeah, moving along, let's just quickly talk about a couple of services that we have within Azure, and it's basically the network infrastructure. And this is not limited to that. We have tons and tons of more, but these are the most widely used terms at the moment within Azure. So what we are talking about is first thing, virtual network. We talked about that. It's nothing but you are provisioning a network. You need to provide what is the pool of IP address you want, likes of 10.0.0/16, and then you deploy a virtual network. Load balancer is going to be like how you're going to make your application available in terms of more and more performance efficiency. Same for application gateway. It basically gives you both the capabilities, keeping high availability, and as well as for your web applications, you can put in a web application firewall, which will help you mitigate a lot of threats. So anything that is coming from OS 10 security, in anything coming from bot mitigation, you will see all those features coming in within application gateway. DDoS protection is one piece, which is basically you're looking at DDoS. If you don't know about DDoS attacks, just quickly Google that. You'll see DDoS attacks is basically distributed denial of services. When someone tries to, like, let's say if you have a very small web application, if you have a very small server, and there is 5,000 request, a software generated request, and it hits that, okay, and your server is not capable to handle that much of load, what will happen is it will crash. Okay, so that's where the DDoS protection service comes in picture, where Microsoft gives you a functionality, where Microsoft helps you in terms of mitigating those kind of issues, where your network, if it is getting DDoS attacks, it gets denied automatically from the requests, and it basically blocks that. And if you see the full view of it, if you just Google Microsoft DDoS protection history, you will see there is a huge amount of DDoS attacks, and I believe in petabytes of DDoS attacks that Microsoft blocks every year. And I was reading an article about it, and it was really amazing number of DDoS attacks that Microsoft protects every time for the Azure environment itself. VPN gateways, we talked about the VPN. VPN gateways are the way to do that. So, in terms of connecting your environment, what will happen is you will be using VPN gateway, you'll be using ExpressRoute gateway in terms of connecting your environment from one place to other, in connecting your environment from your laptop to an Azure site, from your on-premises site to Azure, or any different cloud to Azure as well. DNS we talked about already. CDN is one of the other feature that from network side, it was a revolutionary feature. So you must have seen a lot of time you're loading a website and it says Cloudflare CDN loading or something like that. So it's basically what happens is, in terms of making a global reach, when all the companies started looking at having their website available everywhere, having their content available everywhere, what happens is CDN came into picture. And it basically, what it does is it has a different pops at different location. And it's just, I can understand this from the perspective, okay, whatever the data that you wanted, the companies came up with, okay, we have one in Europe, so we will put it nearby to you. So whatever data that you are loading, that you want to load continuously, and we see, okay, but we are loading one time this document file or this video file, what we are doing is we are caching that in the CDN profiles. And what will happen is, and next time someone tries to access that, it will be served from the nearby. So uh, just take this as an example. Anyone traveling from India to Europe or China to Europe will take what, 9, 10 hours, 11 hours, right? That I'm talking about a person. And if someone is traveling from, let's say, within Europe, somewhere from Netherlands to Ireland or Ireland to Germany, they will take max 1 hour, 1 hour, 2 hours max. So the same way when we are talking about data, right? If the data is traveling from an Chinese website, from an Indian website, from a Thailand website, what will happen is, from a data center sitting in Thailand, what will happen is it will take more time to reach here. And if that is available nearby to your nearby POPs, what will happen is it will load instantly. It will load fairly quickly than coming from there. So that's where the CDN came into picture, and it's basically a secure way of having your data published. It basically helps you caching all the things that is loading, like I'll say repeatable, and even for big contents, definitely it really helps you out from the planning the network perspective. Otherwise, you'll end up with network latency, and your application developers will put all the blame on you, that okay, the network is not performing well, that's why the application is slow on, let's say, Europe and America. Okay. Traffic manager is another way where we are looking at from performance perspective. So let's say if you are coming from India, you should be your request, like let's say you should be going to Indian website, okay, or that is sitting in Indian data center. Uh, if you are coming from likes of Amazon, if you see the Amazon website, if you open it in UK, you'll be presented with amazon.co.uk. If you open it within India, you'll be presented with amazon.in. If you open it in America, you'll be presented with amazon.com, and the backend services gets changed. It loads from the nearby, because it's not the static content we are talking about. So CDN is more of a static content piece. We can definitely merge both of these. So our static content is getting delivered from the CDN, and our traffic is getting, like, a specific compute services is getting defined by the traffic manager where it goes. Okay. ExpressRoute. Okay, this is interesting piece. So ExpressRoute is nothing but I'll say more advanced and the stylish version of VPN gateway. Okay. So VPN gateway, when we started with VPN gateway has its own limitations. And what you are doing is you're just creating IPsec VPNs. You are creating uh, VPN connection between two environments, but you will not be able to have a dedicated line. You cannot have a private fiber connections. So when organizations realize they need more reliable connectivity, and they need more of basically, I'll say, they need more robust connectivity between their environments. So what happens is you go with the express route way, and there are certain in each region there are certain providers, the likes of Verizon, likes of I'm missing the name, but those providers specifically, what they do is they set up a point-to-point connectivity, basically from your express route gateway to your on-premises locations. And basically that helps you out having a secure line. Also, it goes on the speed as well. It goes up to I guess 10 gigs. You can go get up to 10 gigs express route lines. And even if you go with, there are different SKUs in that, and it goes all the way, I believe, 100 gigs as well, in terms of, if you go with the dedicated express route, if you go with like higher SKUs of express route. So ExpressRoute, long story short, it's another VPN gateway, another way of doing connectivity from your on-premises to Azure. And the last piece that we're looking at is the Network Watcher. So Network Watcher is, I'll say, fairly new service that came in, where we are looking at all the components, all the network pieces, and we can basically monitor and troubleshoot what goes in, what goes out, how the network is flowing, and everything. So it's more of a what network operators use as a Wireshark, if you've heard of that. Wireshark is a tool for managing the network. You can packet capture. You can see what is happening in the network. So it's basically a kind of the tool for that. Okay, I'll just see how we are doing for the time. Oh, perfect. Okay, so you created, so basically there are a few concepts that we see when we are designing an Azure infrastructure, right? And I will just skip through a couple of slides, and I'll just go here for a view before we go back. So this is a very, very, very basic Azure infrastructure that we're talking about. Okay. So you have your on-premises network, you have your on-premises router, you have a initial, this is basically a hub spoke, what we call as a hub spoke network. You have one virtual network created here, which is called hub network, and you have different subnets into it. So we talked about VNets and subnets. It's basically you create one block of IPs and then you divide it into multiple IP blocks. And what happens is you can put your policies, you can put your security groups on top of that. So here, what we can see is this is our uh, on-premises router, and this is our VPN gateway, what we talked about. So this is the VPN gateway, and you can see this is gateway subnet. So what we do is we make a connectivity from here to here. Okay. Whatever we do, as we talked about, we want to monitor everything on the internet. Whatever comes in comes out. So we are sending that out with the user defined route, which is called UDR, the route tables, what we talked about. That traffic goes to our firewall, which we talked about again, Azure Firewall. And that Azure Firewall has all the capabilities around NAT and everything. And then anything that comes in, like let's say your VMs, all of these goes from here to here, and it goes all the way to your application, your business, your databases, or maybe your app services if you want to connect to those. So all of that happens like this. So whatever we talked about so far, it's all together, it shows like this. Okay. So anyone sitting in your office location will be connecting through, sorry, will be connect, oh, will be connecting through this, your on-premises router that goes all the way to Azure VPN gateway. Azure VPN gateway on Azure VPN gateway, we have user-defined routes, which is our route table. That route table says, okay, now first go to firewall, get the blessings from firewall that you are okay to go forward, and then go to the application. If we have in firewall, we have a rule set up that, okay, these guys, or whoever is sitting in this office location, cannot go to these web tier. So what will happen is firewall will block straight away anything that is happening. So anything that is there on the web tier, these guys will not be able to access that if the firewall rule says no. So it will block it here itself, so it will not go out. Okay, so that's well and good. We'll go back again. Perfect. So what we talked about right now is we talked about connectivity from your on-premises to Azure. So there can be a couple of things, and I'll just quickly go through all the tools and services that you have. So when your Azure environment wants to connect to internet, you can go with public IP addresses. Okay, you can go with NAT gateways. You need DNS services where if it is public, and if there is any internet inbound is also coming in, like if you're getting any inbound from internet like software web services, you're publishing your website or something like that, you will be needing load balancing, you'll be needing DDoS protection, you'll be needing web application firewall for from security perspective, from availability perspective, you'll be needing all those services. Now, when we are looking at remote access, so from your laptop to Azure, so this is basically me sitting in my home and I want to access the Azure network. And basically, I want to connect as a private user into it. We have point to site, what we call as a point to site connectivity. So you can connect it from everywhere. Again, VPN gateway comes into the play, and you can have a remote access and you can set up the point to site VPN into it. This is another term that we call site-to-site connectivity. So it's that, as the name suggests, you have one site, you have another site. It can be your office location, it can be another cloud location, it can be your own data center. So one site to other site, and everyone in one site connects to everyone in other site. Okay, so that's our site-to-site connectivity. ExpressRoute private is just a dedicated link you are getting between your one side to other side. It's the same thing what you are getting. VNet peering. Okay, VNet peering is one other concept. So you created one VNet and you created another VNet in a different region or maybe in the same region. So these two VNets are independent. They are not talking to each other. So in order to make them talk to each other, what we do is called VNet peering. So you have VM in one virtual network, you have VM in what another virtual network, you do VNet peering and you will be able to communicate between both of them. Okay. So these are the common connectivity methods to Azure basically. Okay. Now we talked about a bit of load balancing, right? When we are talking about load balancing is okay. Let's think of this way, right? Any application runs on resources, right? And when we are talking about resources, it's basically you have let's think of a total conventional. You have a virtual machine which is 2 cores and 4 gigs, okay? And you want to run an application, and that application is that application is configured such a way per user that it is taking so and so memory. Okay, that application can run only I'll say concurrent 1,000 users on that 2 cores 4 machines. Okay. Now what happened is you got a lot of load. You got like 5,000 or 6,000 people coming in to your website concurrently at the same time. Okay. Now what you need to do is you can do either you can resize the machine to make it like something like a 16 core and some 32 gigs or something like that, or you can have like multiple instances of that and distribute the load into multiple virtual machines. So that concept is basically called scaling. When we are talking about a horizontal scaling and a vertical scaling, horizontal scaling is basically when so it's basically adding multiple instances of same thing. So instead of giving one guy energy to fight 10, or instead of putting 10 guys to fight 10. Okay, so it's as simple as that. Okay, and in order to manage that load, in order to manage that services in terms of okay, if something is coming in, how that is going to be distributed, the first one is going to be Azure Application Gateway. And we talked about this. Azure Application Gateway, it is basically gives you a it gives you two things. One is that load balancing capabilities, and as well as you are getting WAF capabilities as well. But this is tied to a region. So when I say region, Azure has different regions, like APAC. We in APAC we have a couple of data centers. So basically, it is tied to a data center location. But to overcome that, we have Azure Front Door, which is basically not region dependent. So what we are looking at is we can deploy Azure Front Door and we can do a load balancing between multiple locations as well. It gives you the same kind of functionalities. There are a few extras, there are a few less as well from application gateway to front door, and we can see that on the Azure front door documentation as well. But it more or less, if you want to swap between one or other, the only functionality that you lose from front door, moving from front door to application gateway is going to be the region independence. So you'll be stuck to one region and application gateway support. So basically, it depends on your design how you want to do it. Okay, there are load balancers. So basically, load balancer is nothing but a common, basically, I'll say plain load balancer. So it is just doing the load balancing. It is just sending the traffic. If this guy is full, if this guy has the enough request, what we have configured for, send it to next guy or send it to some other machine. Or let's say if your one machine is down and if you're doing some maintenance job, your machine A is down, send it to machine B. Traffic manager is going to be the another piece, which is again, it's a load balancer, but same as front door, it is global. And you have multiple ways of doing the traffic management in terms of uh, based on geolocations, based on types and all those. So you get different functionalities, you get global reach, and uh, you get functionalities around segregating traffics around based on different parameters as well within Traffic Manager. Okay, so I believe on this piece, right, there is a specific functionality that you get. You can actually combine them as you need. So it's not like you're using Traffic Manager, you cannot use load balancer, you're using application gateway, you cannot use front door. There are different scenarios based on the architecture design. You can use Traffic Manager and load balancer, you can use Traffic Manager application gateway, you can use application gateway, a front door all together as well. Okay. We talked about DDoS protection already. I'll just skip through these. We talked about web application firewall as well. So as you can see, anything related to SQL injection, anything related to XSS attacks. So these are the common terms that you might hear in any of the programming or any of the security workshops that, okay, XSS attacks, anything that comes in, our application gateway is responsible for blocking those and stopping those requests coming into your application and exploiting your application. Within your VNet, and as I talked about blocking access from a specific IP or allowing a specific IP, so you can see there is a network security group, what we call, which is basically first layer of protection that you get on the network side is you get on the network security group. And as you can see in on here, you can define and allow what is allowed. Like let's say all the on-prem IP addresses ranges will be allowed in this, and denied will be like a specific, all these will be only allowed and rest of all will be denied. So you can actually control what ports you want to open for internet or what ports you want to open for a specific set of IP, and what IPs that you want to specifically allow with the network security group. Okay, yeah, that was me for today. Is there any questions we have? I'm open to take questions. I'm not sure, Surag, if you are here, I can see a hand up.
Yes. Uh, I think there was couple of questions in the chat box. I think it's already in the
Okay.
upside. Maybe I can see if I can see any questions.
Okay. Okay, so I'm just scrolling through the questions, right? And I can see, okay, yeah. So someone has asked for an Azure certification path link. So basically, the Azure certification path, the best networking certification that I can recommend from Azure side is going to be AZ700. So AZ700 is basically for network administrators, and you can it covers all the areas what we have within our uh, Azure side. And basically, before going to, I'd recommend that to all the people who is going for an architect track as well. So basically, you have to get started with your initials, likes of AZ900, understanding the concepts and everything. And if you want to specifically pursue your career in networking, go directly for that. Otherwise, you need to take the step-by-step process, because the networking concepts goes really advanced when we are looking at it. Okay. Uh, okay, what else we have? So I see people are really excited about the certificates.
So there is a couple of questions at the end. If you can go back to the most recent questions, you should be able to see a few of it.
Okay. What is the difference between Cisco and Azure? Oh, lovely. That's okay. So Cisco and Azure, so one is a company, one is a product. That's the biggest difference. So Cisco is Cisco is a company itself which specializes in networking, and Cisco has different products as well. So Cisco comes with Cisco provides a firewall. Cisco provides even I had a friend come visiting me yesterday, and he had a Cisco satellite phone. So Cisco does a lot of things. If you are using Azure, you can use Cisco products like Cisco next generation firewalls. You can use Cisco WAF and all those stuff. So basically, these are specifically like Cisco is a company which provides networking tools and networking products. Even on premises scenarios, you deploy a lot of Cisco products in your environment. You deploy Cisco routers, you deploy Cisco switches. Okay. In Azure side, when it all went to cloud, Cisco also came up with virtual appliances, and that's what we are looking at. Okay. Can we see the live environment? We can definitely see the live environment, which one we are looking at. Okay. Load balancers. Okay, load balancers provide high availability and increased performance for applications by distributing inbound traffic and by bypassing fail nodes. That's correct. Exactly. So load balancers are used for specifically for that. We make sure that anything that is going down, and there is a specific component within the load balancers called health probe, which checks you set an interval and checks your website on the back of it. If it is a website, if it is a service running, if it is API running, it checks every, let's say, 3 minutes or 20 seconds or two seconds, whatever you want to set up. It checks if it is available or not. And let's say by anything, if Windows update happened on that machine or something, someone messed up some things, and that machine is not replying and that service is not replying to that, what it will do is it will block the traffic for that machine, and it will start sending to whatever node is available to that. Yes, you can definitely have that slides. I believe, Surag, you can facilitate that. I'll share that with you. Yeah, this session should be 2 hours. To be very honest, I think there has been a bit of confusion between me and Surag here. Uh, we were looking at 2 hours, but the invite came in for an hour only.
Oh, is that so?
Yeah.
Okay, okay.
So
It may be some error from my side for that certificate. Okay.
that's totally fine. Okay, we can definitely have a follow-up sessions, and what I will be expecting is the more I'm not sure, the more you can provide your expectations in terms of if we want to have any deep dives into specific components of Azure, because Azure's have a huge number of networking components as well. So if you want to get into virtual WANs, if you want to get into express routes, we can have a live demo of that. We can have like each and every pieces of that. And it's not even possible to cover in 2 hours, to be very honest. That is everything with live demos. Okay. Is there any recorded? Any questions?
Yeah, hi. Good morning, Tushar.
Hey, Navindu. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Thanks for the wonderful session. I have some questions like about Express route. Is it limited like in local or as in distance wise?
No. So basically, ExpressRoute connectivity it's dependent on, yeah. Basically, what you can have is you can have it with your local region. So you have ExpressRoute, you have ExpressRoute Direct, you have ExpressRoute Global Reach. So it's not only limited to your nearby data centers, but with different SKUs that you have there, right? So if you just Google ExpressRoute, you'll get multiple options. So you'll get ExpressRoute, you'll get ExpressRoute Local, you'll get ExpressRoute Direct, you'll get ExpressRoute with Global Reach. So once you do the express route with global reach, you can connect it to any data center within. And but everything comes with a cost. And when you're designing the infrastructure, just because I have not seen any specific requirements like that. So the way we design the infrastructure, you do express route to your nearby location, which is your nearest data center, okay, just because your services should be nearby to you, you do the express route connectivity that you have VNet peering attached to it, and you go back and forth with the VNet peering. So basically what you have is uh, it's like a two-hop process. You go to one network and you go to another network from there, but you get the similar experience because all the Azure regions specifically, they are backed by Azure Backbone. Basically, it's called Azure Backbone Network. So it's a really fast network connectivity between one Azure region to other Azure region. So it doesn't add any latency on top of it.
Okay, thanks, thanks.
I
And
hope that
one more
answered your
last
question.
question I have, what's the preference of deny and allow rule? If likewise, if I allow a user for some
Mhm.
application or some ports, and if I create a network security group and add the user to the network security group and deny him the preference, so what will happen? Will it
So
be allowed or denied?
first thing first, the users doesn't get added to network security groups. It's just the IPs we are talking about. Okay.
Ah, yes,
So
exactly.
So it depends on the layers that you are talking about. So as we talked about in the hub and spoke architecture, right? So we have first is Azure Firewall sitting on top of it. We have then our network security groups. So if the traffic comes from internet, lands on your Azure Firewall, if Azure Firewall says, okay, go ahead, you can go next. Okay. If Azure Firewall has an allow rule, it goes to the network security group. If network security group also says, okay, you can go ahead, you can access this, then it will go to your application. If network security group says it is not allowed, then it will block there. Same way, if the request comes into Azure Firewall or a web application firewall that you have a deny rule there. If it is denied there, no matter if you have allowed in your network security group, it will not reach there. So it
So the
depends
preference
on
will
the
go.
routing.
Yeah,
So
the
there is
preference
there
will
is
only be
no
denied.
preference.
Okay.
Yeah, there is no preference that takes precedence. It depends where the traffic is landing first. So when you are trying to access something from your laptop to internet, if the traffic is not routed to a firewall which blocks anything, right?
Okay.
So it will not block. It will go directly to the whatever website that you want to go. But if it is routed to the firewall, then the firewall will inspect.
Okay, got it. I read somewhere that there is a concept of precedence, like deny will always take over allow rule. So that's why I just wanted to clarify.
On the network security group, I'll sorry, Surag, I'll just take your screen back for a second again. Okay, here. So on the network security group, right? This is the network security group. And before this, I have just mentioned this allow, and deny, right? Before
Oh, yes.
this, there is a priority that comes into picture. Okay. So the lower the priority is, the higher the precedence it takes.
Okay.
So on the allow and deny, I can just go to an Azure environment, maybe just one second. Ta-da. We'll go here and we'll go here and we'll see actual network security group here. Meanwhile, if you have any other questions, just drop it in the chat. I will get back to that piece. So network security groups. So this is the Azure portal. We are looking at the network security groups. And here, let's say we have this guy. So as you can see, these are the so basically by default, if you put a network security group, so deny all inbound takes in place. So this is default rule that comes into picture where we are looking at this is 65500. So this is basically the highest number. So this is the lowest precedence that it takes. Okay.
Okay.
So this guy, anything that you add with lower number than this will take precedence first. So I
Okay.
have put a 300 here, which is way lower than that. So that says, even though if it says all deny all inbound, but there is a rule that says, okay, RDP should be allowed. So I'm going to allow RDP. Okay.
Okay.
So if you want to add, let's say if I want to add, if I want to block this RDP, right? I don't need to make this, delete this rule. I can just go here. Okay. Sorry. I can just go here. I can add in a rule. Okay. I can call it, I can just put the priority to 80 or maybe 299 and source any port range will be 3389 for RDP and destination port name range will be 3389 again. So if I create this rule, this will block the RDP. No matter if I have this RDP connection. Okay. So no matter if we have this allow rule here, right, with priority 300, still
Okay.
just because the priority 299 is lower, that will take precedence and it will block the RDP. I hope that's clear.
Okay. Yes. Got it. Thanks very much.
Okay. Anything else we have? Or we're good. Can I integrate Microsoft 365 as a Microsoft 365 is a SaaS service. So when I say SaaS is a software as a service, so Microsoft doesn't give you a networking capabilities in that. So you can definitely integrate my M365 services. So there are the likes of logic apps and service bus kind of things. So you can pass on the messages and traffics back and forth. But M365 gives you a SaaS service offering. So you cannot actually work with and play with the networking of that. It's all managed by Microsoft. That's the concept of SaaS, that you don't need to manage networking, virtual machines, and etc. etc. Okay. We talked about Azure Bastion. Okay, Azure Bastion is nothing but, okay, Azure Bastion is something that you use to access a virtual machine. Just because RDP is not safe over public, so if you cannot open RDP for public endpoints, you cannot put a public IP and put RDP onto it. There'll be a lot of attacks. People will start guessing your password and basically admin password. So what will happen is your account will be locked out, your domain accounts will be locked out. Those kind of things will start happening. So in that case, that's why we use Azure Bastion. That's a safe way of accessing that. It happens over HTTPS connection. So you go on the your Azure portal, you click on connect on the top of your virtual machine, and you get a Bastion option. It's a paid service, so you have to wait. It's I guess 125 euros or something around that. That's it costs, and you can access anything related to a virtual machine to that particular virtual network or connected virtual networks. Okay, hope that's good. Okay. What are the similar components that are present to AWS example VPC? So example VPC is the VNet. My personal opinion, AWS has made it all complicated. You have all the easy wordings. You have easy definitions within Azure. So VPC translates back to your VNet. Subnets remains the same. You have NAT gateways at AWS as well. Here as well, AWS, you need to put a NAT gateway to go out at any cost. And here you can go out anyway, but if you put NAT gateway, you get a static IP. Rest of all, it's all clouds are similar. It's just the naming that changes. Perfect. Okay. Any other questions? Perfect. I believe if we don't have, okay, we do have. Can I connect different organizations at different places via Active Directory? If you're talking about when Microsoft Active Directory, Windows Active Directory, yes, you can have different Active Directories at different places. You need to have VNet peering if you are using only Azure components. If you're using on-premises and cloud, or if you're using on-premises and different location and cloud, then you can sync it with normal Azure AD sync. And also this piece is basically if you're talking about Azure Active Directory, then yes, definitely you can use it for different locations. Okay, we have a company and has 100 employee users. Some of employees are using laptops and hybrid setup. Then what do you suggest in terms of using Azure? For net, is this networking applicable to us? Yes, your networking, if your application requires, right now, I'm not sure how you have exposed your applications. And if you want your app employees to have a secure access to cloud, basically, you should be looking at point to site connectivity, or you should be looking at Intune deployment just to have a direct Microsoft connectivity. And 100 employee users, if they are all working remotely in a hybrid setup. Okay, yeah, so definitely you should be looking at moving your applications to cloud and looking at connectivity from all the laptops via point to site connection, or having another firewalls or anything in place, just to make sure that your network is secure. And any point of time, if you're trying to connect to, if your employees are trying to connect to your applications, they're using a secure channel. It cannot be like there is a lot of attacks like of man in the middle. I personally look after security, so I have experienced a lot of network components making a lot of noises around this because of not having a proper network security in place. Okay, I hope that answered your question. Yeah, I believe I'll keep an eye on this chat for next half an hour. Okay, so if you have anything, just drop it in the chat, and we can have a yeah, we can definitely, I can reply to that. Last question, I'll take this because it's an interesting one. And AI is going to change. Yeah, definitely. I believe I'm very positive about it. Maybe in next year or two, there'll be no me talking here, and you'll be interacting with an AI only, and that will be giving the sessions. So we are moving towards the Transformers edge. So everything can happen. To be very honest, no one can predict. Even 1 year back or 2 years back, if you have asked me, and even the when we were looking at the data center days, right? No one has predicted that no one will have a data center. You can still have your services running. Now then, the cloud came in and everything changed. Still, the AI is going to come in, but definitely I always say there is always infrastructure is not going anywhere. The network is not going anywhere. How you're going to connect to AI if you don't have networking? That's the thing. Someone has to design, someone has to manage. It's not going to manage itself. Perfect. Yeah, I believe we can conclude. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining in. And thank you so much, Surag, for inviting me for this. And we'll definitely look forward for any follow-up sessions that you want.
Sure, definitely. Thank you all for joining with us as well, and see you in the upcoming session. And I have shared all the link related to today's session and our YouTube or the certificate or the community link if you want to be participating in the upcoming session with Tushar itself, or there are a couple of other speakers who will be talking as well. Thank you again for Tushar to be presenting. It was a really exciting session, or was really we did fast pace a little bit, but we wanted to include a lot of points out,
Yeah.
but it was easy to understand anyway. But yeah, thank you again, Tushar, to be doing this for the community, and thank you all for spending your time with us, and have a great rest of the day.
Thank you so much. Bye bye.
Thank you. Bye.